Terraforming is tough to get right. With so many stunning islands with perfect cliffs and rivers being shared online, you may feel like you could never do something like that. Everyone else seems to make their island flow seamlessly from one build to another, and you're sat there looking at straight rivers which just don't look as natural. It's fine. We've all done this at some point. If you're struggling to create those stunning cliffs and rivers you see in those pretty islands, here are some simple things you can do to transform your terraforming. When you unlock the terraforming tools for the first time, it's really exciting because it's often the sign that you can start decorating your island properly. If you've picked out your theme and planned out some builds for your island, it's tempting to dive straight into terraforming, but if this is your first time, I wouldn't suggest tackling any big terraforming projects just yet. If you're unfamiliar with terraforming and you try to fix what you already have, you may inadvertently remove too much and worry that you've ruined your island. If this happens, don't panic, it can easily be replaced, and no, you haven't ruined your island. If you need to, focus on smaller sections of terraforming as you get used to the tools. It's far easier to learn the basics when you're working with what you already have than it is to rebuild from a completely flattened island. If there's an edge to a cliff or a river that slightly annoys you when you try to decorate, use the terraforming tools to fix it up a little and work up from there as you become more confident. Making smaller terraform sections is typically what island designers will use as part of their landscaping to add some visual interest to their islands. They help break up a flat walkway or a larger open area on their islands. So practicing with smaller areas of terraforming will help you become more confident with the tools, and they help you begin to build out your island to be more aesthetically pleasing than you may have realised otherwise. Once you've gotten used to the tools and had a bit of practice with small sections of terraforming, you can then start planning out the larger builds on your island. Knowing what type of builds you want and where they're going to go is really going to help you work out what sort of terraforming you want for your space. If you need to, you can always draw out a rough sketch of what you're trying to make, or you can use online tools which can help you count the number of tiles you'll need for your build. Planning in more detail can help with a build that is more complex, and it's something I've done to help me visualise how my rock garden is supposed to look when I wasn't sure how the terraforming was going to form part of the build. Whilst you're planning things out, make sure you leave plenty of room for everything you want to include, and I'm not just referring to having space for cliffs and rivers. It's very easy to go into terraforming and realise that little bit too late that you don't have enough space for a path leading from one section to another, or that your cliffs are no longer big enough to fit the building you want. When this happens, you may end up needing to move your terraforming around to get everything to fit. Leave as much room as you think you're going to need for what you're planning, and then give yourself a little bit more wiggle room. It's far easier to work with a space that is too large than one which is too small, particularly if you're trying to do multi-layer cliffs which need space around each layer for your characters to climb up, and need even more space on each layer if you're planning to decorate them. You want your terraforming to look like a natural part of your island, and making sure you leave enough space for everything is super important for adding those final details into a build. And if your terraforming is forming part of a bigger build for your museum and shops, you may want to consider using the in-game path tool to give you an idea of how much space you need to leave for the building and for decorating. There are plenty of guides online which show you the size of each building and where the doors are located, so you can easily map these out into your terraforming to make sure everything will fit. I would suggest using an in-game path you aren't planning to use for decorating in your build, and swap between different paths if it helps you differentiate between where a house is going and where a walkway or bridge needs to go. There are many different ways to start terraforming, and depending on the type of build you're looking to make, you may want to try different techniques to get the look you want. If you're working on a build where your cliffs are forming part of a fake building, you can easily add cliffs next to each other and keep adding in layers until you reach your desired shape. For a natural looking cliff, if you are starting to work from a squared shape, you'll want to extend out your terraforming until it forms a more interesting shape. Changing the direction of your terraforming every 3 to 5 tiles can help make your cliffs look more natural, but be sure to weave both in and out on your terraforming so that it doesn't become too big or too small for what you want to achieve. However, if you struggle with creating a natural looking island, you may want to try a different technique to get some pretty terraforming. What I like to do that you can also try is to place tiles in a seemingly random pattern to form the outline of the shape you would like to make. This helps me a ton because I can visualize how much space my terraforming takes up and how much room I need to leave for decorating. By doing it this way, You can easily increase the size of your terraforming without committing to a completely done section and trying to make it look natural later, which may be more helpful to you than trying to work with a squared section first. Once you're happy with a rough shape, just fill in the middle, and before you know it, you're almost done with your terraforming. When you have the main shape together, you're going to want to round out the edges for a natural finish. Both water and cliffscaping work in the same way in terms of rounding out the edges. You need to have at least 3 tiles on the end in order to round out the 2 edge pieces. If you try and do this with any less, you'll end up destroying the blocks. Play around with the amount of tiles you have on the edges for curving. The more gradual the curve you have on your rivers and cliffs, the more natural and aesthetic it looks. And by creating unusual shapes in your landscape from weaving in and out and rounding the edges, you'll break up the monotony of straight lines, which give you a more visual interest on your island. Let's also talk about bridges and inclines, because adding these into your planning process is really important for terraforming, as you want to bear in mind how visitors are going to navigate your dream address. Depending on what you're working on, you may want to think about where they're going to go before you fully start terraforming, particularly if they're being used as access points for a larger build. Inclines are the easier of the two to plan out, as they have a set size of 2x4 tiles and can be placed either horizontally or vertically against a cliff edge. There are 2 different ways you can use them. You can either have them at the end of your terraforming, or you can clip your cliffs back and have them melt into your terraforming. If you want to put your incline in the cliffs, just remember that it takes away decorating tiles from you, and you may want to extend your terraforming out as a result to give you a little bit more space to work with. What I personally like to do is to plan my rough terraform shape, then use the in-game path tool to map out where I want my incline to be. Doing this then allows you to check the access around the build before you commit to fully placing down your incline. Bridges work a little differently to inclines. Although they take up the same tile footprint, your rivers need to be at least 3 wide before you can place down a kit. But there is a little secret that many players don't actually realise about bridges that you can use to add dimension into your island design. Bridges can actually come in different sizes depending on how wide your river is. It really shocked me the first time I heard this. Whilst you do need your rivers to be at least 3 tiles wide to place the kit, you can actually get longer bridges with slightly different looks if your river is 4 tiles or 5 tiles wide. If you're playing around with how your rivers look, you may want to try mixing up the width in different places if you're planning to put a bridge down somewhere anyway, as you may find that your island looks really different just by mixing up the sizes of your bridges. The other thing related to bridges that you may want to try doing on your island is placing them on a diagonal. You'll often see diagonal bridges used in these stunning islands you find online, and they're really pretty to look at and really simple to do. All you need is 3 or 4 diagonal lines of water that are 4 tiles long. Dig out the middle pieces, then round the edges, and you'll be able to place your bridge on a diagonal. Even though they take a ton of space, they look so stunning in natural islands, and it's something you'll want to consider if you really want to take your terraforming and island design up a notch and create a beautifully aesthetic island. Terraforming is such a fun part of Animal Crossing New Horizons because it allows you to completely change your island layout into whatever you want it to be. It's a key part in helping you get a 5-star island, and if you want to improve your island design and take your decorating to the next level, watch this video here where I went through some of the key tips which will completely change the way you think about decorating, and I'll see you over there.